Hi, I'm Dr. Dawson. A couple of things that seem to bother parents and grandparents, in my opinion, unnecessarily, are thumb sucking and pacifiers. And so I'd like for us to talk about those a little bit today, and maybe we can worry about those things a little bit less. So the first thing to keep in mind is babies are kind of divided into three groups. There's a third that are just born to suck, and they're going to suck on something. It may be their foot, it may be their thumb, it may be their fingers, maybe their blanket. It may be a pacifier, but they are going to suck on something. There's a second third that wouldn't take a pacifier on a bet. And those are the parents, frequently if it's their first child, that are all smug saying, well, my child doesn't take a pacifier. Don't worry about those parents. Give them a few years. They have a couple more children. One of those children will be a sucker. The third group can kind of take the pacifier or leave it, don't really care. That third doesn't really give us too much trouble, so we're not going to talk about them. We're not going to talk about them at all. So let's talk about the first group, the group that's really born to suck. Does that matter? And the answer is kinda, but not for the first few years. So we need to understand that the way your mouth is formed has something to do with genetics, but is also affected by the way your tongue sits against your teeth, the way your lips and cheeks sit against your teeth, and those things have a big factor too. So if you've ever known anyone that had chronic nasal obstruction where they couldn't breathe through their nose, their face will get thin and elongated, and that their palate will have a really steep, high arch to it because they breathe through their mouth all the time. Likewise, if a child does take a pacifier or suck their thumb, the teeth will get pushed out a little bit from having the pacifier in there, and that is a change. But if they stop using the pacifier before they're 3 or 4, the lips and the tongue will push on the teeth and bring them back to their normal position. So we don't really have to worry about that. But if there's a potential for this problem, why don't we just avoid thumb sucking and pacifiers, altogether? And I think if we do that, we kind of overlook the silver lining and the benefit that non-nutritive sucking has for those children who really crave it. And, if you've had a situation where there's something that makes you feel better when you're stressed and it doesn't have any long lifetime, complications, then I'd say those things are good things. I wish I had more of those things in my life. And if you've ever had a little baby who wakes up at 2 a.m. screaming, and you can go put the pacifier in their mouth and they're happy as a clam and back asleep in 30 seconds, as opposed to not giving them the pacifier and walking up and down the hall with them, for 2 hours to get them back to sleep, I would say that 30 seconds is better than 2 hours. So I think there is a silver lining to it, and we don't need to worry about it in those first few years. Now, what can we do? Maybe we can help them some. I think we can sometimes push them to suck on things we prefer that they suck on. I personally prefer the pacifier over the thumb just because the pacifier is a lot easier to get rid of. A side note is children that suck on their middle two fingers. Those fingers are longer and it tends to gag them. And so they will frequently gag and spit up a bunch just because they suck on those middle two fingers. It's a nice little hook 'em horn sign, but otherwise I would probably avoid that. So if we're not worrying about the first couple of years, but then those years have passed and the time has come to do something, how do we make them stop? Well, the pacifier is actually pretty easy. The nice thing is most children that don't care that much about non-nutritive sucking will give it up around the time they're 1.5 years old. The ones that are the big holdouts, they tend to give it up around the time that they're 2.5 years old. So most of this will take care of it in the time frame that we're concerned with, and we don't have to do anything. The ones that are a little slower to get rid of it, I sometimes will try to diminish their sort of habit use. I'll still let them use it when they're stressed or when it's time to go to bed. But, when they're going around what I call kind of the cigar phase, where they just kind of have it hanging out of their mouth like a cigar all day, we might try to remove it when they don't need it and still let them have it at the times that they do. Then you'll come to a period where the whole pacifier thing doesn't seem as vital to them. And then we'll frequently have sort of a cold turkey day where classically we'll wrap it up like it's a birthday gift and give it to the garbage man. I had one family that tied it on to a helium balloon and then let it go to pacifier heaven. And I thought that was pretty cool. I'm not sure that the airlines would agree that that's a good choice. But in any event, we have some sort of dramatic cold turkey event. They may grumble for 24 hours after that, but it's very, very unlikely that after 24 hours you'll hear anything about it again. So pacifiers usually pretty easy. Thumb sucking, a little bit trickier. I think the main thing is not to nag them about it all the time. Anyone who's ever been married knows that nagging really doesn't get rid of any problems. In my case, if everyone was on my case to eat less ice cream all the time, well, then all I can do is I just think more about ice cream and just are mad at you for trying to get involved in my life. So let's not nag. We can sort of help them with this process. The first thing I think we can do to help is when they get to be about 3 years old, it's nice to seek sort of an authoritative outside figure like a doctor, the pediatrician, or a dentist, and let that person have a little serious conversation with them about how they used to use the pacifier, but now they're 3 and they're really too old to be using a pacifier. And if they continue to, it will hurt their teeth. And it's amazing how frequently that will help get rid of the problem. And so it's certainly worth a try. And then in worst case scenario, we have to go to sort of aversion therapy. In this case, that means painting some nasty tasting stuff on their thumb for about 6 weeks. The key here is, once again, don't make it a battle. If you get into a battle with them over this, they're just going to devote all their energy to this battle and the problem will not get solved. What you can do is you can help them accomplish a goal that they're working on. And so the way we do that, we paint the nasty tasting stuff on first thing in the morning to help them remember during the day not to suck on their thumb. We paint it on last thing at night before they go to bed to help them remember. And if there's times during the day that they seem to be forgetting sucking their thumb, we can help them by painting the medicine on to help them remember. So anyhow, if you do those things for about 6 weeks or so, most of the time that will take care of the thumb sucking problem. So we've all heard the horror stories about where the dentist had to put in a metal device in the top of their mouth to keep them from sucking their thumbs. It is very unlikely that anything like that would ever be necessary. So there's 2 more problems that you don't have to worry about. And I can assure you that every child in my practice had given up the pacifier or their thumb sucking before high school. So I hope that helps.